Welcome to Bella's World, where real-life drama meets spicy secrets. Subscribe to never miss a new story.
Okay, so you want to know why I was secretly involved with my married boss for over a year. And now my fiancé is gone and acting like I'm some kind of monster. I'm Abigail, I'm 28. And honestly, I don't even know where to start with this whole mess because everyone is acting like I'm the worst person alive, when really this whole thing is way more complicated than people want to admit. Like, yeah, I get that what I did wasn't great, but Reed is 30 years old and he's acting like such a baby about the whole thing when we both know our relationship wasn't exactly perfect to begin with. I mean, come on, we've been together for 4 years and engaged for 3 months, and suddenly he wants to act all shocked and betrayed, like he never saw this coming. Please, before I get deeper into this story, please do me a small favor. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like if this already sounds insane, and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. I always love seeing where my audience is from around the world. Trust me, this gets so much worse. The thing is, Reed was always the type to do everything for me, and I thought that was sweet at first, but after a while it just got so annoying because he was always trying so hard to make me happy, and it felt fake, like when someone is that eager to please all the time, it makes you wonder what they're really after or what they're trying to hide. And don't even get me started on how he would remember every stupid little anniversary and plan these elaborate dates that I never even asked. For it was like he was performing being the perfect boyfriend instead of just being himself. I started working under Dion about 6 months into our relationship. And right away, I could tell he was different from Reed. In every possible way, Dion had this confidence that Reed never had this way of taking charge and making decisions without needing everyone's approval. First, he was probably in his mid-40s, married, and honestly, he carried himself like a man who knew what he wanted and wasn't afraid to go. After it, when Dion would compliment my work or touch my shoulder during meetings, it felt real and earned. Not like Reed's constant reassurance that felt more like he was trying to convince himself I was worth keeping around. I know that sounds harsh, but you have to understand that Reed was so predictable and safe that being around him started feeling like being trapped in a routine that was slowly suffocating me every morning. He'd ask how I slept every evening, he'd want to know about my day. Every weekend he'd have some plan to spend quality time together. And it was also suffocating because there was never any mystery or excitement or spontaneity with Dion. There was this electricity in the air every time we worked together, this sense that anything could happen. And after being with Reed for so long, that feeling was like a drug. I couldn't get enough of Reed would come home from his job as an IT manager and want to talk about our future and make plans for the wedding, and all I could think about was how boring our life was going to be if nothing ever changed. I started creating distance between us without really meaning to giving short answers when he asked about work, staying late more often, finding excuses to avoid his attempts at romance because honestly his efforts just reminded me of how much more alive I felt around Dion. When Reed proposed 3 months ago, I felt this panic in my chest because saying yes felt like agreeing to settle for a life that would never excite me. Again, but saying no would have meant explaining why, and I wasn't ready for that conversation yet, so I said yes and tried to convince myself that maybe marriage would change things. Maybe having that commitment would make me appreciate Reed more, but deep down I knew I was just buying time to figure out what I really wanted. The worst part was how happy Reed was after I said yes, how he started talking about our future, like it was this amazing adventure we were going on together when all I could think about was how trapped I felt. He started planning the wedding immediately, asking my opinions on venues and flowers and all these details that felt so overwhelming because I couldn't picture myself actually going through with it every time he would show me something he'd found online or talk about our honeymoon plans. I felt this weight in my chest because I knew I was lying to him just by participating in the conversation. And the whole time Dion was right there at work, making me feel things Reed never could, reminding me every day that there was a whole world of passion and excitement that I was allowed to give up forever. If I went through with marrying Reed, I kept telling myself that maybe the feelings for Dion would fade. That maybe once Reed and I were married, things would settle into a better rhythm. But every interaction with Dion made it clearer that what I was feeling wasn't going away. Anytime soon, the thing about working late with Dion started so innocently that I almost convinced myself it wasn't really anything. At first, just him needing extra help on projects and me being dedicated to doing good work. But honestly, even from the beginning, there was this tension between us that made those late nights feel dangerous in the best possible way. Reed would text, asking when I'd be home, and I'd feel this thrill lying to him about deadlines and urgent assignments. Because what Dion and I were building felt too precious and exciting to share with anyone else. Those first few weeks of staying late, Dion would order dinner for us, and we'd eat in his office talking about work, but also about life and dreams, and all these deep conversations that Reed and I never seemed to have anymore. I found myself comparing everything: how Dion listened without trying to fix my problems, how he challenged my ideas instead of just agreeing with everything I said, how he treated me like an equal instead of someone who needed to be taken care of all the time. When Reed would ask about my day, I'd give him the basic facts but leave out all the meaningful parts because somehow sharing those moments with him felt like a betrayal of what Dion and I had. I know that sounds backwards, but you have to understand that what was happening with Dion felt real and authentic, in a way that my relationship with Reed hadn't felt in months. Reed was so focused on being the perfect fiancé that he stopped being himself. And I was so focused on playing the part of the grateful girlfriend that I forgot who I was too. With Dion, I could be sharp and ambitious and challenging without him getting his feelings hurt, or trying to smooth over every disagreement with some romantic gesture. The night Dion kissed me in his office, I'd been hoping it would happen for weeks, and when it finally did, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, instead of some huge dramatic moment. He just looked at me while we were going over spreadsheets and said I was brilliant. And then suddenly, his hand was on my face and we were kissing, and it was like every conversation we'd had was leading up to exactly that moment. I didn't feel guilty or conflicted or any of the things you're supposed to feel when you cheat. I felt relieved that finally someone was seeing me for who I really was, instead of who they wanted me to be when I got home that night. Reed was asleep on the couch waiting for me, with some romantic comedy paused on the screen and flowers on the coffee table from our engagement celebration, and looking at him made me feel so frustrated because he was trying so hard to be everything I wanted when what I wanted was already happening somewhere else. I knew right then that whatever was starting with Dion was going to change everything, but instead of feeling scared, I felt excited because finally something in my life was unpredictable. Again, Dion told me his marriage had been over for years, and they were only staying together for appearances and business reasons, and whether that was completely true or not didn't really matter because I wanted to believe it, and it gave me permission to stop feeling bad about what we were doing. He made all the arrangements for our first time together at this hotel across town, and the whole thing felt like being swept up in something bigger than myself. Instead of making a calculated decision to betray Reed, when Dion handled every detail from booking the room to buying wine to making sure we wouldn't be seen together, it felt like he was taking care of me in this sophisticated adult way that made Reed's eager to please routine seem juvenile. In comparison, that first afternoon together was everything I'd been missing with Reed: passion and intensity, and this feeling that we were both getting exactly what we needed from each other without having to pretend or perform or make it into something bigger than it was. What people don't understand about having a secret relationship is how quickly it becomes normal, how easy it is to live two completely different lives when one of them is giving you everything you've been craving. Dion and I fell into this routine of meeting 2 or 3 times a week at the same hotel, and he would handle all the arrangements while I perfected The art of lying to Reed about where I was and what I was doing, I got really good at creating believable stories about work projects and girls' nights and family obligations. And the weird thing was that lying to Reed became almost as exciting as being with Dion because it felt like I was finally taking control of my own life instead of just going along with what everyone expected from me. Reed would ask about my day, and I'd give him just enough truth mixed with fiction to keep him satisfied. And the whole time I'd be thinking about text messages from Dion, or planning our next meeting, or remembering details from our last time together. I know how that sounds, but you have to understand that Reed had become so predictable and needy that every conversation with him felt like a performance I had to give instead of something I actually wanted to participate in. When Dion would text me while I was sitting next to Reed, watching some boring movie, or listening to him talk about wedding plans, I'd feel this rush of adrenaline that reminded me I was still alive and desirable, and wanted by someone who wasn't trying to lock me down into some suffocating domestic routine. The craziest part was how Reed's attempts to be understanding and supportive during this time actually made me resent him more because his kindness felt like weakness compared to Dion's confidence and self-assurance. When Reed would notice that I seemed distant or distracted and try to talk about it, I'd find myself getting annoyed with him for being so needy and insecure instead of just giving me space to figure things out. I started picking fights with him over stupid things like how he loaded the dishwasher or what we watched on TV because fighting felt more honest than pretending everything was fine, and also because it gave me reasons to leave the house or stay out late. Without him questioning me too much, Reed would try to smooth things over with romantic gestures or by suggesting we talk through our problems. But all of his efforts just reminded me of how much more exciting and uncomplicated things were with Dion. With Dion, there was no analysing our relationship or planning our future or trying to fix problems. There was just this pure chemistry and connection that didn't need to be labelled or defined or turned into something permanent. I convinced myself that what Reed and I had was settling into the kind of boring long-term relationship that kills your soul slowly, while what Dion and I had was real passion and excitement that proved I was still young and desirable and worth pursuing every time Reed would bring up the wedding or talk about our future together. I'd feel this panic because I couldn't imagine spending the rest of my life pretending to be satisfied with someone who made everything so easy and predictable. I know it sounds crazy to complain about having a partner who was reliable and loving and committed, but when you're 28 and you feel like your life is already mapped, out in the most boring way possible, reliable starts feeling like a prison sentence. Dion made me feel like I was still capable of being surprising and spontaneous and dangerous, while Reed made me feel like I was already turning into some suburban wife who gave up on adventure and excitement for the sake of security and stability, the whole year and a half that the secret relationship lasted. I never once thought about what I was doing to Reed, or how much it would hurt him if he found out I was completely focused on myself and what I was getting from both relationships, and how clever I was for managing to have everything I wanted without anyone getting hurt. When Dion got promoted and transferred to another state, I felt like someone had ripped the heart out of my chest, because suddenly the most exciting part of my life was just gone, and I was stuck with Reed and our boring routine and wedding plans that felt more suffocating than ever. I tried to convince myself that maybe it was for the best, that maybe now I could focus on appreciating what Reed offered and building a real future with him. But every day felt grey and empty compared to what I'd been experiencing with Dion Reed. Noticed that I seemed depressed and kept trying to cheer me up with surprise dates and thoughtful gestures, which only made me more irritated because his efforts reminded me of what I was missing and how inadequate our relationship felt without that spark of danger and excitement I started feeling. Trapped in this life that everyone else thought was perfect. Stable job-loving fiancé, beautiful ring wedding plans. But that felt like settling for mediocrity when I'd tasted what real passion could be. Like the engagement ring on my finger started feeling heavy in a way it never had before, like this symbol of a promise I wasn't sure I could keep to a person I wasn't sure I could love the way he deserved. 3 months after Dion left, I was lying in bed next to Reed, listening to him sleep, and suddenly I couldn't handle the weight of pretending. Anymore, couldn't stand the thought of walking down the aisle and promising to love and honor someone, while keeping such a massive secret about who I really was and what I'd done. I know people will say I only confessed because I felt guilty, but honestly it was more about feeling suffocated by the lie than feeling bad about the secret relationship itself. The relationship with Dion had shown me parts of myself that I'd forgotten existed, had reminded me that I was capable of passion and risk and living for something more than just security and stability. Reed woke up when he heard me crying and immediately started trying to comfort me, asking what was wrong and how he could help, and his automatic response to take care of me just made everything worse because I knew I was about to destroy his whole world, and he had no idea it was coming. I told him I had something to tell him about my time working with Dion, and I watched his face change as he realized this wasn't going to be some small confession about a work mistake or a minor problem he could help me solve. The words came out all at once that I'd been seeing Dion for over a year, that it had been going on almost our entire relationship, that I'd lied about where I was and what I was doing hundreds of times. Reed just stared at me for the longest time without saying anything. And instead of relief, I felt this weird frustration that he wasn't reacting the way I expected him to react. I think part of me wanted him to yell or cry or beg me to explain how I could do this to him, but instead he just got very quiet and started asking these calm, methodical questions about when it started and how often we met and whether we used protection. His composure made me feel like he didn't care as much as I thought he would like. Maybe our relationship hadn't meant as much to him as he'd always claimed it did. I found myself giving him details that I probably should have kept to myself, telling him about the hotel and how often we met, and even some personal details about what Dion and I did together. And the whole time Reed just listened and asked follow-up questions like he was gathering evidence for some kind of case instead of processing the destruction of his entire future the days after my confession. Reed just went on autopilot, going to work, coming home, like nothing happened, which frustrated me because I expected drama and emotion. Instead, he started organizing our stuff and separating finances like a business transaction, making me feel disposable. 6 months later, I'm sitting here trying to figure out how everything went so wrong so fast. And honestly, I'm starting to think Reed planned this whole thing, because there's no way someone gets over a 4-year relationship and a broken engagement this quickly, unless they were already halfway out the door through mutual friends. I found out he got promoted at work, started going to therapy, reconnected with college friends, and apparently he's dating someone new who everyone describes as sweet and supportive, and everything I apparently wasn't. The whole thing feels like some kind of elaborate revenge fantasy. Because how does someone who was supposedly devastated by betrayal suddenly become this thriving, successful, happy person who acts like the last 4 years never happened? I've tried reaching out to him a few times just to check in and see how he's doing, but he never responds to my texts or calls, which feels unnecessarily cruel, when all I'm trying to do is make sure he's okay. After everything that happened between us, Reed has completely erased me from his life. Like I never existed, blocked me on social media, changed his phone number, and apparently told all our mutual friends that he doesn't want them sharing information about his life with me. The level of coldness and calculation in how he's handled this whole situation makes me think maybe I never really knew him at all. Maybe the sweet, caring guy I thought I was with was just an act, and this vindictive person who can cut someone out of his life so completely is who he really is. Most of our friends have taken his side in all this, which feels incredibly unfair because relationships are complicated and nobody knows what really happened between us except him and me. People are treating me like I'm some kind of terrible person, when the truth is that Reed and I had grown apart and weren't meeting each other's needs, and sometimes people make mistakes when they're trying to figure out what they really want in life. I tried to reach out to Dion when I heard he was back in town for business, thinking maybe we could reconnect and see if what we had was worth pursuing now that we're both free. But he basically acted like he didn't know me when we ran into each other at a coffee shop downtown. The way Dion looked right through me like I was a stranger after everything we shared together makes me think men are just incapable of real emotional connection and only care about the chase until they get what they want. It's like everyone in my life has decided I'm the villain in this story, when really I'm just someone who made some imperfect choices while trying to navigate complicated feelings and an unfulfilling relationship that was probably doomed. Anyway, I've lost most of my friend group, my ex-fiancé acts. Like I never existed. The man I thought I had real feelings for turned out to be using me for entertainment. And somehow I'm supposed to feel grateful that people are showing me their true colours by abandoning me when I need support the most. Reed is out there living his best life with someone new while I'm dealing with the fallout of decisions that, honestly, we're both responsible for since he let our relationship get so stagnant and boring that I had to look elsewhere for excitement and passion. The whole situation has shown me that people love to judge and take sides when relationships fall apart, but nobody wants to acknowledge that sometimes two people just aren't compatible, and forcing it leads to everyone getting hurt. In the end, I'm better off without people who can't forgive one mistake and treat me like I'm irredeemable, instead of recognizing that I'm human and humans are flawed and relationships are messy and complicated. Everyone wants to paint this as some simple story about someone who made a mistake and a victim. But the reality is that Reed and I were both unhappy and both contributed to our relationship failing. And if he can't acknowledge his part in what went wrong, then he was never the person I thought he was anyway.
Subscribe to never miss a new story.